"You've got to be kidding me," Mark exclaimed, staring at the dilapidated house through the windshield of his car. Raindrops tapped an impatient rhythm against the glass, blurring the image of the decaying monstrosity before him. The GPS had led him straight to it, as if the universe itself had conspired to make him face his fears. "I'm not kidding," Rachel replied calmly from the passenger seat, her eyes scanning the address on her phone. "This is it. The one Uncle Larry left us in his will." Mark sighed heavily. "It looks like it's about to collapse." Rachel shrugged. "It's been empty for ages. Maybe it just needs some love." They stepped out into the downpour, the cold rain instantly soaking through their thin jackets. The house loomed over them, tall and eerie, its windows like gaping sockets in a skull. The once grand mansion was now a mere skeleton of its former self, ivy clinging to its sides like desperate fingers. The door creaked open, revealing a musty interior that smelled of forgotten memories and decay. Mark and Rachel stepped inside, their footsteps echoing through the vast emptiness. Rainwater had seeped in, staining the wooden floorboards a sad shade of brown. Summary 1. Mark and Rachel arrive at an old, dilapidated house they inherited from Uncle Larry, feeling skeptical and nervous. Despite its decayed exterior, Rachel remains hopeful that the mansion could be restored. "Well, it's definitely got character," Mark said, trying to sound positive as he stepped into the entryway. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper that whispered secrets of past lives and lost laughter. A grand staircase ascended into the gloom, its banister carved with intricate patterns that seemed almost alive in the flickering light of their flashlights. "Yeah," Rachel murmured, her voice barely carrying over the sound of the rain. "It's like it's been waiting for us." They explored the house, each room revealing more of its tragic beauty. The living room, once a place of warmth and comfort, now held only shadows and a sense of forlornness. The kitchen, with its ancient appliances, spoke of meals never made and families never fed. The dining room, with its long, dust-covered table, was a silent witness to countless unshared feasts. In the corner of the room, Rachel noticed a tattered book lying on the floor. She picked it up, her curiosity piqued. The title, barely legible, read "The House of Whispers." "What's this?" she called out to Mark, who was poking around in the next room. Mark walked over, wiping his hands on his damp jeans. "Looks like it's been through the ringer, but it's probably just some old novel." As Rachel opened the cover, the pages fluttered in the damp air, releasing a faint, unsettling scent. It was then that the house seemed to breathe in, as if eager to share its long-held secrets. The book's pages were brittle to the touch, as if they had been wet and dried 100 times over. Rachel squinted in the dim light to make out the first few lines of text, but the words danced away from her, as if afraid of being read. Mark, ever the skeptic, took the book from her and examined it. His eyes grew wide as he read the inscription on the first page: "To those who dare to enter, the house tells its story." "This is ridiculous," he said, trying to laugh it off. But his voice held a quiver of doubt. Rachel looked around the room, the silence thick with anticipation. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the house, making the curtains billow like ghosts. The candles on the mantel flickered erratically, casting strange shadows on the walls. "Did you do that?" Rachel asked, her eyes darting to her brother. "Do what?" "When turn on the lights." Rachel pointed up to the chandelier above their heads. It had come to life, casting a warm glow across the room that seemed to push back the shadows. "I didn't touch anything," Mark said, his voice barely above a whisper. They both knew something was off. The house seemed to have a life of its own, and the whispers grew louder. They ventured up the grand staircase, the whispers following them like a sinister choir. The second floor was a maze of corridors and closed doors. Each step they took echoed down the halls, as if inviting something to follow them. Rachel's heart raced as she clutched the banister, feeling the house breathe around them. The air grew colder, the whispers grew clearer, and she could almost make out words. The siblings paused at the top of the stairs, listening. The whispers grew louder, then softer, as if playing a twisted game of hide and seek. Rachel took a tentative step forward, the floorboards groaning beneath her feet. Mark grabbed her arm, his grip tight. "We should go," he said firmly, his voice trembling. But Rachel was transfixed, pulled towards the darkness like a moth to a flame. With a sudden jolt, the book in Mark's hand slammed shut, the sound echoing through the house. The whispers stopped. Rachel's eyes widened as she felt an icy hand touch her shoulder. She spun around, but there was nothing there. Just the cold, unyielding stare of an empty corridor. The house was silent for a moment, holding its breath. Then, slowly, the whispers began again, louder than before. Rachel's heart hammered in her chest. I think ... I think the house wants us to explore, she said, her voice shaking. Or maybe it's telling us to leave, Mark suggested, but Rachel was already moving down the hallway, drawn by the eerie siren song of the whispers. He had no choice but to follow, the book clutched tightly in his hand like a talisman. The whispers grew into a cacophony, leading them to a door at the end of the corridor. Rachel reached for the knob, her hand trembling. It was cold to the touch, almost frosty. Mark's grip tightened around her wrist, but Rachel's curiosity was stronger than her fear. She turned the knob and pushed the door open, revealing a room shrouded in shadows. The whispers grew to a crescendo, and as they stepped over the threshold, the door slammed shut behind them. They were trapped in the room with whatever secrets the house had been holding. Rachel took a deep breath, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. And then she saw a figure standing in the corner, watching them with hollow eyes. Her scream pierced the air, echoing through the corridors of the house. Mark fumbled for the light switch, his hand shaking. When the light flickered to life, the figure was gone, leaving only a cold, empty space. Rachel's breaths came in ragged gasps as she clung to her brother, her eyes searching the room in terror. The whispers grew into a chorus, a symphony of pain and despair. They seemed to come from every corner of the room, each voice a ghostly echo of a past resident. Rachel and Mark realized they weren't alone. The house was filled with the spirits of those who had suffered within its walls. The siblings decided to split up and investigate the whispers separately, hoping to find a way to put the tormented souls to rest. Rachel took the left side of the room, her flashlight casting jagged shadows on the floor. The whispers grew more distinct, forming a chilling narrative of loss and betrayal. She found a photo album on a dusty shelf, its pages sticking together with time. As Rachel flipped through the pages, the whispers grew more insistent, as if begging her to listen. The pictures were of a happy family, a mother, a father, and 2 children. The same children's laughter echoed through the house, but it was tainted with a sense of foreboding. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine as she reached the last page. It was a photograph of the children, standing in front of the house, their faces twisted into horrific expressions of fear. The whispers grew louder, turning into screams. Rachel dropped the album, the pages fluttering to the floor like the wings of a dying butterfly. She turned to Mark, her eyes wide with horror. "We need to get out of here," she shouted over the din. But Mark was gone, the whispers having drawn him deeper into the house. Panic set in as Rachel searched for her brother, the house seemingly changing around her with every step. Doors slammed shut and locked, walls shifted, and the whispers grew more menacing. Rachel's heart raced as she stumbled through the labyrinthine corridors, desperately trying to find a way back to Mark. The house was alive, and it had a vendetta against them for disturbing its eternal slumber. As she rounded a corner, Rachel saw a flicker of movement up ahead. She raced towards it, her hope soaring. But instead of finding Mark, she stumbled into a room filled with the spirits of the house's past inhabitants. They hovered in the air, their eyes accusing, their voices a cacophony of anger and sorrow. The spirits swarmed around her, their icy touch burning through her clothes. Rachel screamed, her voice lost in the chaos. But amidst the maelstrom of ghosts, she saw something that made her heart drop. Mark's flashlight, lying on the floor, flickering out. The house had taken her brother, and it wasn't going to let either of them escape without a fight. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any clue as to where he could be. The whispers grew into a deafening roar, the spirit's rage palpable. Rachel stumbled back, her hand brushing against the cold wall. A sudden chill shot through her, and she felt a strange pull. The wall behind her gave way, revealing a hidden passage. It was as if the house itself was guiding her, showing her the path to Mark. Without hesitation, Rachel stepped into the narrow, dark corridor, the whispers now a frenzied chant, urging her onward. The air grew colder, the walls closing in around her, but she pressed on, driven by the fear for her brother. The passage twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the bowels of the house. Rachel's breathing grew shallow, the air thick with the scent of mildew and despair. Finally, the corridor opened up into a vast, shadowy chamber. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror, its frame tarnished and covered in cobwebs. The whispers grew to a fever pitch, and Rachel could feel the malicious intent of the house. Mark's light was nowhere to be seen, but Rachel knew she was close. The whispers grew louder, coalescing into a single, clear voice that seemed to speak directly into her soul. "Find him," it hissed. Rachel's heart skipped a beat. The voice was eerily familiar, a twisted echo of Uncle Larry's. The mirror began to ripple, and Rachel felt a strange pull towards it. Her hand reached out, trembling, and touched the icy glass. The world around her warped, and Rachel was suddenly no longer in the house. She was in a nightmarish version of her childhood, her and Mark playing in a garden, their laughter piercing the silence. But as she watched, the scene grew darker, the shadows lengthening, and the laughter turned to screams. The house had shown her a memory, a fragment of a terrible event long buried. Rachel understood now the whispers were the echoes of their family's pain, trapped within the mirror's reflection. To save Mark, she had to face the truth behind Uncle Larry's will, and the secrets the house had been keeping for generations. With newfound determination, Rachel stepped closer to the mirror, her reflection distorted and twisted by the rippling surface. She took a deep breath and called out into the abyss, her voice strong and clear. "Mark, where are you?" The whispers grew quieter, and a single, desperate voice responded, "Rachel. Rachel. Help me." It was Mark, somewhere in the depths of the mirror. Rachel didn't know how she was going to get him out, but she knew she had to try. The house had a plan for them, but she wasn't going to be a part of it. Her hand hovered just above the mirror's surface, the coldness seeping through her skin. Rachel steeled herself and plunged her arm into the icy depths, feeling the whispers coil around her like serpents. The mirror's hold was strong, but Rachel's love for her brother was stronger. She felt him, just out of reach, his hand brushing against hers. With a cry of effort, she yanked her arm back, pulling Mark with her. The mirror screamed in protest, the house shaking around them as the siblings tumbled to the floor. Rachel wrapped her arms around Mark, her eyes squeezed shut, waiting for the inevitable retribution. But the house remained still. The whispers had ceased. Rachel opened her eyes, expecting the worst, but the chamber was empty. The spirits were gone, and the air felt lighter. The mirror stood silent, its secrets no longer whispering. They had survived the house's trap, but Rachel knew their journey was far from over. The House of Whispers had more stories to tell, and she was determined to uncover them all, no matter the cost. They had inherited more than just a crumbling mansion. They had inherited a legacy of pain and darkness, and it was up to them to set it right. Taking Mark's hand, Rachel helped him to his feet. They both stared at the mirror, panting with fear and exertion. Rachel felt a strange emptiness in the room, as if the house had exhausted its anger. The air no longer hummed with malicious whispers, and Rachel allowed herself a glimmer of hope. They made their way back through the twisting corridors, the house seemingly cooperating as it led them out of the labyrinthine chamber. The lights flickered back on, casting a dim but welcoming glow across the peeling wallpaper and dusty floors. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching them, waiting for their next move. Once back in the relative safety of the living room, they huddled together, trying to make sense of what had happened. Rachel spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "What was that place, Mark?" Her brother's eyes were haunted as he spoke. "It was a prison, Rachel. A prison for the souls that the house has claimed." They decided they needed to leave, to escape the clutches of the House of Whispers before it could claim them as its next victims. Rachel grabbed the book from the table, slipping it into her bag. They had to find out more about their uncle's legacy and the secrets that lay within these walls. The rain had stopped, leaving the night eerily quiet. They stepped out into the cool, damp air, the house looming over them like a silent sentinel. Rachel looked back one last time, a shiver running down her spine. She knew they would return. They had to unravel the mystery that had been woven into their family's history. Once back in their own home, Rachel and Mark pored over the book, their eyes scanning the pages for answers. The whispers had been silenced, but the story was far from over. The book spoke of rituals and curses, of a family torn apart by greed and deceit. Rachel's heart grew heavy as she read, realizing that Uncle Larry had left them more than just a house, he had left them a burden. As they turned the pages, Rachel found a section that spoke of a way to free the trapped spirits. It required a sacrifice, something precious and pure. Rachel looked at Mark, her eyes filled with dread. They had to go back. They had to save those lost souls, including their uncles. The siblings made their plans, gathering what they believed was needed for the ritual. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but the house had chosen them, and they couldn't ignore the call. The following night, armed with candles, sage, and a sense of purpose, they returned to the House of Whispers. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow through the windows as they stepped inside. The house felt different now, as if it were watching them with anticipation. They made their way to the chamber with the mirror, their hearts racing. Rachel could feel the whispers stirring again, but they remained silent, biding their time. They set up the ritual, the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. Rachel took a deep breath, holding the book open to the correct page, and began to read the incantation. The air grew thick with energy, the house vibrating with the power of the ancient words. The mirror rippled and swelled, its surface becoming a swirling vortex of darkness. Rachel felt the spirits gather around them, their cold, desperate touch reaching out, seeking escape. Mark lit the sage, the smell of burning herbs mingling with the musty scent of the house. Rachel continued to read, her voice steady despite the fear that clawed at her insides. The mirror grew more agitated, and the siblings could see the faces of the trapped souls, contorted with pain and anger. With a final, powerful incantation, Rachel threw the book into the mirror. The glass shattered with a sound like 1,000 screams, the shards flying in all directions. The spirits rushed out, a maelstrom of light and cold. Rachel and Mark shielded their faces, feeling the house's dark energy dissipate as the souls found their freedom. When the dust settled, the chamber was empty, the mirror gone. Rachel looked at her brother, tears in her eyes. "We did it," she murmured. "But at what cost?" Mark asked, his gaze on the shattered glass. They gathered their things and walked through the house one last time, the whispers now replaced by the soft sighs of relief from the freed spirits. Rachel felt a strange mix of sorrow and liberation as they passed the rooms that had held so much pain. The house, once a prison, now felt like a grave that had finally been put to rest. As they approached the front door, Rachel paused. "We can't just leave it like this," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of their discovery. "We need to fix it, to make it right." Mark nodded solemnly. "We'll come back, Rachel. We'll restore it. We owe it to Uncle Larry and the others." They stepped out into the moonlit night, the house standing tall behind them, its secrets no longer hidden. Rachel looked back, knowing that their work had just begun. The House of Whispers was now their responsibility, a burden they had to bear. The siblings returned to their own home, the warmth and light a stark contrast to the chill of the mansion. Rachel placed the book on the kitchen table, its pages now filled with the whispers of the freed souls, a testament to their experience. They had uncovered a dark chapter in their family's history, but they had also found a purpose. The weeks that followed were a blur of research, late-night phone calls, and trips to the hardware store. They worked tirelessly to restore the house, repairing the decay and chasing away the shadows. Rachel had never felt closer to Mark, their bond forged in the face of fear and adversity. But every time they set foot in the mansion, they could feel the eyes of the house on them, watching, waiting. The whispers had faded, but the house remained a living, breathing entity, its walls holding the echoes of the past. One day, Rachel stumbled upon a hidden room, untouched by their renovations. It was filled with Uncle Larry's belongings, his life frozen in time. Among them, she found a letter, addressed to them. "Dear Rachel and Mark," it began. "The house has chosen you. It is now your duty to mend the hearts it has broken, and to heal the wounds it has caused." Rachel's eyes filled with tears as she read on, the weight of their inheritance settling on her shoulders. The letter spoke of an ancient curse, passed down through generations, and the terrible price that came with breaking it. Rachel looked at Mark, the gravity of their situation finally sinking in. They had released the spirits, but the house itself was still haunted, its very foundation tainted by the darkness of their ancestors. The siblings knew they couldn't just fix the house, they had to heal it. and that meant confronting the past, the very thing they had been running from. The House of Whispers had chosen them, and they had to face the truth of what lay within its walls. With a deep breath, Rachel folded the letter and placed it back where she had found it. "We're not done yet," she said to Mark, her voice determined. "We're just getting started," and together, they stepped into the shadows of the room, ready to face whatever secrets the house had left to reveal. The hidden chamber was a treasure trove of forgotten memories, each item speaking of a past filled with both joy and sorrow. Rachel picked up a dusty music box. The delicate tune it played a haunting reminder of happier times. Mark found a set of old keys, their purpose lost to the ravages of time. As they sifted through Uncle Larry's possessions, they felt a strange kinship with him, a man they had barely known. The house had been his burden, and now it was theirs. They discovered journals filled with his thoughts and fears, his obsession with the house's whispers evident in every page. It was clear that he had known about the curse and had been searching for a way to break it. The siblings read through the entries, piecing together the history of the House of Whispers. It was a tale of love and loss, of power and greed. Their ancestors had built the house on sacred ground, disturbing the ancient balance, and the spirits of the earth had taken their vengeance. The only way to truly heal the house was to set things right with the land it stood upon. They would need to perform a ceremony to appease the spirits and lift the curse for good. Rachel and Mark felt a mix of excitement and dread. They had come so far, but the most daunting task was still ahead. They gathered the necessary materials, the house seemingly cooperating by guiding them to the perfect spot in the overgrown garden. Under the light of a waxing moon, they began the ritual, their voices carrying the incantations into the night. The air grew thick with anticipation as they offered their apologies and asked for forgiveness. As they worked, Rachel felt the earth beneath her tremble, a sign that something was happening. The whispers grew faint, then disappeared entirely. The house let out a sigh that seemed to shake the very foundations. When they were done, they looked up to find the once dilapidated mansion bathed in a gentle glow, as if it had been reborn. The curse was lifted, the house no longer a prison for the lost. Rachel and Mark stood hand in hand, their hearts racing with the knowledge that they had changed their fate. But as they turned to leave the garden, they heard the faintest whisper, a promise that the house would always be a part of them, a silent sentinel watching over their lives. The House of Whispers had become the House of Memories, a place where they could honor the past and build their future. Rachel and Mark knew that the whispers would never truly be silenced, but they had found a way to live alongside them, turning fear into a strange sort of companionship. The siblings stepped back into the warm embrace of their home, the house standing tall and proud behind them. They had restored more than just a building, they had restored a legacy. The whispers would remain, a gentle reminder of the responsibility they had accepted, but now they were whispers of hope, whispers of peace. The house was no longer a prison, but a beacon of light in the darkness. Rachel and Mark had become its guardians, the keepers of a secret that would bind them to the House of Memories for the rest of their lives. And as they closed the door on that chapter, they knew that their story was just beginning.